as far as from an astrological perspective, this year it sees a lot of uncertainty and volatility continuing right through until probably the middle of the year.
Mhm.
In the middle of the year, there is a pretty significant, huge astrological alignment. And knowing the powers that be utilize and manipulate these types of celestial events to implement things, I would see that as a pretty significant turning point. And that's around early July and late July. Um, we might have some sort of false flag terror attack, sudden shock event, maybe a attack on the grid or, cyber attack or something like that, that might lead then to a place where, the war tends to escalate further. Hey, mate.
Good morning. How are you, Luke?
I'm well, mate. I'm well. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
That's
What's going on in your life?
oh mate, fucking flat out. Like outside of the work situation, we're renovating a house in Ashmore on the Goldie.
Yeah.
So we're halfway through that. So we're, you know, cooking out of a camp kitchen. We've pulled the kitchen apart. We've got half the backyard done. We're
Oh, wow.
crazy paving. Like fuck, it's been chaos
What a mess.
since I think we started probably about 3 months before Christmas. So
Yeah.
we're doing it most of it ourselves.
Yeah,
And
good
then
on you, man. Do
and
you
then
like get your hands dirty?
yeah, yeah. So my brother and father, one of my brothers and my dad were builders, so grew
Yeah.
up around that sort of stuff. So quite handy with most things. And if you need to get a sparky or a plumber or something like that, but otherwise most of the stuff you either do yourself or learn how to do it really quickly.
Yeah, yeah, for
But
sure. These days,
yeah,
like with YouTube and things like that, you can quickly get a 5 minute, 10 minute, 15 minute lesson on just about anything. Hey, like, yeah, you've got a
absolutely.
teacher at the ready to give you all the tips and tricks of what to do. So,
Yeah,
everything's at your fingertips just about. So, yeah, that's
yeah.
good,
I love a bit of YouTube University. It's good.
I
Yeah,
think most people that sit on this side of the fence would be probably more on that same boat of like just trying to learn new skills and just become a bit more, I don't know, worldly in terms of your abilities and stuff like that. No one wants to be left vulnerable
yeah.
or, caught with their pants down, so to speak. So we're all doing, certain things that maybe even a couple of years ago we'd never thought in a million years that we'd want to do, right? So
Oh, 100%.
time's wild.
100%.
Be in the
Yeah.
trade sort of industry. Is that what I heard once? When you like a
I was a pest controller for 20 years.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah,
a long
yeah.
time.
Yeah, yeah. So pretty much from when I left school, about a year or two after I left school, I was down as a lift operator at these snowfields for a season and then
Yeah.
had a heap of fun and didn't have any money. And I said to Dad, what the fuck, this is shit. And he was a builder turning into a building inspector back in the early 90s or late 90s. And he was subcontracting pest guys to do the pest work. So he said, man, why don't you get your license to do that? And I've given all this work to these guys. Instead, I'll give it to you.
Oh, sure.
And back then, it was literally 20 questions at the health department in Southport. You went and sat, and that you got a pest license.
Right.
It got more stringent in time after that, but yeah. So then I did it for a few years here, and then I went and lived in London for 3 years, and I was a pest controller over there. And then when I came home from that, I started up my own business again, and then I ran that right through until 2016.
Yeah,
So
that's mad.
yeah.
So the obvious question is like, how does a pest controller get to astrology? That's a freaking leap and a half, isn't it?
Yeah, it's probably I always say to people my gateway drug was a 9/11 conspiracy video around 2012.
Yeah, really. What'd you watch?
I don't know if it was Loose Change or Zeitgeist or one of them. There was a lot happening at the time.
Zeitgeist.
Fahrenheit,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, all those types of movies that were coming out on or docos on YouTube back in the day. Before, YouTube used to be the wild, wild west. There was no censorship or anything. That sort
Mm.
of came in around 2017, I reckon. And yeah, it just up until that point, I'd always gone along with the narrative. I hadn't had a reason to question it at that point. And that was the first time I was like, hang on a second, what? Like, there's a conspiracy about this? What do you mean conspiracy? Like, it just it happened at a period in my life where I was probably starting to become more aware and wanting to answer questions. My private life, my personal life, I wasn't super happy in.
Mm.
So I was sort of looking for answers. And yeah, I came across that video, which was just the gateway drug into like, all the rabbit holes that you go down. I went down all of them, flat Earth, everything. I found a guy, Santos Bonacci. He's an Australian astrotheologist. And his early stuff was phenomenal in relation to tying astrology and religion together.
Mm.
And I wasn't raised religious. Um, so that was interesting to me. I was like, hang on a second. So the religions of the world are telling the story of the stars through their mythology and allegory. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
there's got to be something to astrology. Like it has, like that just it was in my mind. I'm tying them together and thinking there has to be something to this. Up until that point, I knew I was a Virgo. That was it. Like I didn't know anything about
Yeah,
astrology.
sure.
And you read the horoscopes in the magazines and newspapers, and you're like,
Yeah, back of the
some days
paper.
it hits, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
But then when you look deeply into it and you look at birth chart analysis, then you're like, oh, there's more to it than just where the sun was when you were born.
sure.
And yeah, way back in the day, I found a free online sort of blueprint that you could print off, and it tells you loose things about your birth chart. And it's made a lot of sense to me. I was like, fuck, this is uncanny how it can sort of, describe me in certain attributes, traits, and characteristics.
Mm.
And that was enough for me to go, okay, I need to go and find a professional astrologer, and I need to talk to an astrologer now. So I'm on the Gold Coast, and I found a lady here that's yeah, she was one of the trainers for the academy as well. And yeah, I went and saw her, had a reading, and then she started teaching me because I was just like, I need to know more about this. At the time as well, my current partner was studying psychology through university. And we were both coming into the profound sort of understanding of the human psyche from different points of view. It created a bit of conflict within the relationship. But like it was like, how do you, she was saying to me, like, how do you know this stuff? And I'm like, well, this is just how you interpret this. And yeah, that was enough for me to just go, okay, there's something to this. And the nature that I have is I'm very curious. I want to know why things are the way they are. I think when I was in my, 7, 8 year of age period, mum and dad bought me those, 200 or 501 facts about any, like just useless facts that you would have about stuff. And I was interested in all that stuff. Like, oh, that's interesting. Anytime I'd ask a question like, why is that the case? And the answer would come through, I'd say, well, why is that the answer? So I
Yeah,
had that
sure.
sort of desire to like, and that thirst for knowledge and for knowing.
I see.
And yeah, astrology provided some of the clarity around that.
Mm.
And so did conspiracy, right? And I always say to people, if conspiracy doesn't lead you to spirituality, I think you're doing it wrong. But a lot of that
That's
gave me
interesting.
it gave me a sort of an underpinning and the ability to question your conditioned belief system. I think that's the best thing about conspiracy is it causes you to question like what you've been told, what you've been taught. And I think that's a gateway to expanding your consciousness is the ability to question what you think you already know. And why do you know that? Who taught you that? Is that something that you were just taught through education? Is it something that came on the TV? Did you see it in a movie? Like, why do you know that? So,
Mm.
yeah, and the ultimate form of questioning reality is, I think, flat Earth. Um,
Yes.
because hang on a second, whoa, 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 that's a bit full on. Like, what do you mean? It's not a globe? And at the beginning of that phase of that journey, when I come across that, I was like, "Yeah, get the fuck out of here! There's no way. That's just ridiculous. That's just ridiculous." Until eventually, then more and more information come around, and then the next thing I started to have that openness towards it, and I was like, "Hang on a second." So now I would say I'm not a globe earther, and I'm more lean towards the flat model, but I'm always open to new information and facts and data and stuff coming to sort of then challenge that opinion or belief or perspective. But that's the ultimate. I think if you can say to someone, okay, well, like maybe the shape of the earth is not the way they've been telling us, then I think that's the catalyst to like all bets are off. All
Great.
bets are off. Like if they're lying about that and they're doing it in like an orchestrated way,
Mm.
conditioning, why are they doing that? That's where I come from that perspective is like, why are they doing that?
Yeah,
Why?
yeah, for sure. I
Why?
think like when you for my personal experience, it's I found as a child growing up, I had the same curiosity as what you did in terms of just seeing things for what they maybe appear in reality, but then also sort of picking apart like what was happening. But it was for my personal experience, it was more to do with like you as a person. So I'll one example that comes to mind, it's probably later on in in my life where I was working in my dad's business as an apprentice carpenter, and this guy come up to him and said, "Look, I'm looking for work," and um, it sounds very simple on the surface, but I might have been like, say, 15 or 16. I just left school, and dad was like, see this guy, man, like he's coming, he's asking for work. He said he's struggling for money, and like that's the kind of person you want to be. And I said, yeah, that's great, but he's got brand new shoes on. And he would say, "Oh, well, what does that mean?" I'm like, "Well, he's not short of cash if you've got brand new kicks." It's just like, what's going on there? So like, this obviously is something doesn't match up. Anyway,
Right.
so it's a very basic thing, but I guess looking back in retrospect, it was just one of the things that I kind of did. But in saying that, I'm a very suggestive person. So I'm kind of like, I think I could be easily hypnotized, I can, and when you talk about 9/11 and conspiracy theories and stuff like that,
Yeah.
the same way that you can say to me, the Earth's flat, and I can go, oh, really? Okay, well, let's just go into this and then kind of look for evidence to support it and not blatantly dismiss it, is the same way that I would just go into, oh, 9/11 is like, wow, that's a, devastating thing that happened. The government's always batting 1,000, like everyone's just like straighty 180, and I'm just naive to the world. So that was sort of like going into that kind of zeitgeist was the opening for me in terms of wanting to know about the monetary system and the military industrial complex and all that kind of stuff. Then it's kind of like, okay, well, if I'm wrong about that, what else am I wrong about? And this is like the fucking onslaught of almost going insane, right? And I guess you wouldn't be any different to me or to most people that are on this sort of plane is like or path, particularly when 2020 come along and all of the like the red flags started to appear. And you're like, man, I've seen all this before. I wonder where this is all coming from. But then it kind of just sent you into a loop, and that's where it was more of a spiritual and a battle of the minds than it was about
Yeah.
your perception of what was going on. It makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the other thing is too, like we tend to attach our identity to what we know or believe.
Mm,
So when you have to question what you know or believe, you have to actually then challenge the identity that's attached to it. And that's where a lot of people come into conflict to conspiracy, which is, I think, the truth. The conspiracy is the reality we're being presented by the mainstream narrative. But the truth side of it, when people sort of go, "Oh, I don't know about that," it's because they haven't the ability yet to question who they think they are or who they think they've become because they've
mm,
attached identity to what they know or believe. So, and that's where a lot of people in 2020 had a lot of conflict within, their family and friends and social connections because they were going, "Well, hang on, this is what's it," but people weren't ready to accept that because it meant that it had to threaten their whole idea of who they were, and therefore they went up against that and created a lot of conflict and division and things like that. So
mm,
that's why it's like the sort of metaphor of when someone is walking around sleepwalking, and they're going to the fridge and they think in their reality they're awake, right? They don't know they're asleep. So if you wake them up while they're in that dream state, it's quite damaging to them because they freak the fuck out. And
yes.
it's no different to someone that's stuck within their conditioned belief system. If you push upon that when they're not ready, it's diabolical. And they'll tend to then resist that at every cost, even though from your point of view, like, hang on, like, why can't you see? It's like just because the reality they're in is like a dream state. So people have to then emerge out of that at whatever time that their individual soul is ready for that next expansion of consciousness. You can't sort of force it on. You can drop breadcrumbs and you can sort of guide a little bit, but you can't force that process because to fracture someone's reality via their identity, it's very detrimental.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
and it sort of speaks to a bunch of human needs in terms of wanting to be accepted, wanting to be a part of the pack. I mean, humans are naturally pattern recognition specialists. We kind of see what's going on and then we just do what other people do because that seems to be the way that the world works and how I can fit into what's going on in society. So the moment that all starts to like you said, get dismantled and fractured, then you start to become isolated. And as you know, like isolation is a form of torture. Like it's one of those things where you start to push someone or an animal away from the herd. Like it typically dies because it just can't survive on its own without its family and all the rest of it. Whereas most people in this space that kind of went through that process were feeling like they were on the cliff's edge and not knowing which way to turn or having an option to kind of like understand themselves for the first time. And I think like this awakening, which is, fairly overused term these days, but that whole sort of getting to know yourself again, and unveiling, that sort of that higher self, that authentic self, that sort of, I don't know, almost like a dormant blueprint that you've been ignoring because you've been in a state of almost like hypnosis, Luke. Would you agree? Like
Absolutely.
because you're in society and everything is the way it is, and you go to work and get a job and pay your bills and all that kind of stuff, you are essentially sleepwalking. You are essentially in a hypnosis, and then once that breaks, then you're like, holy fuck, like where am I and what the hell is going on? And
Mhm.
then we kind of like reorientate ourselves to find people like each other, and then okay, now we're back to homeostasis. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's two things there. Like that's the idea of the sixth sense, even though it's like with the afterlife, it's like I see dead people and they don't know they're dead. It's almost like I see asleep people and they don't know they're asleep because within their reality, they don't realize that they are conditioned to just form and attach to that sort of, education, information, or belief, right?
Mm,
So the second part you mentioned about like, bit feeling outcast, like you're on that cliff edge and you're ostracized and you have to then rebuild this sense of self, non-attached to this old way of seeing the world or yourself or the sense to belong. That for me is right where astrology is at its best because it's a blueprint for your soul's journey, right? So it can help you understand. Now, you're not trying to fit someone into their astrology, you're just using that to help them understand who they really truly are. And that's for me the sort of foundation of the work that I do is I stand in the gap between that old version of you and that becoming version of you. And
mm.
I sort of encourage alignment towards the blueprint, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, that's why I do what I do, because along my journey, for me, when I went through that process, I did it from 2012 through 2017 is when I had my mass awakening
Hmm.
and it was done internal alone and no one knew I was going through that, so people would see some changes within me and they'd sort of question like, is everything, what's going on? And a few
Sure.
conflicts within the family, especially when I push ideas like flat earth and that, they think you fucking lost your mind. But I went through that process on my own. Having, though, a bit of a foundation in astrology was a tool to like help me continue to go on that path. So when
Mm,
I got through the other side of it, 2018, that's when I said, well, that's what I'm here to do. And I made the transition in 2018 from pest controlling into astrology.
yeah.
And I don't look at myself as an astrologer. I look at myself as someone that helps people like find their true self. And I use astrology as the tool for me to be able to do that. I
Mm,
use other tools as well, but that's the main fundamental tool. And once you understand the language of astrology, the chart sort of speaks to you. And I can see the person through the chart and I can talk to them through their chart and help them bring awareness and light and key sort of aha moments as to why things might be the way they are, why they behave the way they do, or why they have these challenges the way they have them. It's like, here it is, here's the information. It's just presented in a way that they can digest and then integrate into mass changes in their life.
got
So,
it.
yeah,
That's
it's a
awesome.
fantastic tool. And, you know, those in the know, they use astrology. So
Yeah,
when you
absolutely.
understand the language and the symbolism of astrology, you see it used.
Yeah,
You see events timed to it. You see it used in marketing and promotions of logos. Yeah, it's
agreed.
phenomenal to the extent that you see it. Yeah.
And also, like when I think I've heard you allude to this before. Is this you? How should I put this? I'm stumbling my words. When you see millionaires and billionaires look to like astrology, tarot readers, like some sort of spiritual guide that they turn to, you understand that there's something in that essence of like it's non-physical, right? So, well, it's probably both in a mixture and trying to, like you said, determine or at least interpret, what's going on in those cycles. So, my understanding is very limited, which is why I wanted to talk to you. So,
Mhm.
I have certain ideas that have been put forward to me in terms of numerology, your moon sign, your sun sign, like your sun rising and moon rising and all that kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
then, but mostly my understanding is that I'm a Taurus and we're stubborn and we're slow movers and we like repetition, just all those sort of character traits, of like
Yes.
what we're
Yes.
about.
Yeah.
But so I guess what I am understanding though, if we can kind of tie in the flat Earth
Oh yeah.
theory with astrology, or you mentioned astrotheology before,
Mhm.
does that align in a sense with the way the Earth plane is stationary and the moon and the sun sort of do these things and the constellations move? Is that kind of married together in astrology terms? Am I making sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So when I went down the path of the conspiracy, the rabbit holes, understanding astrotheology, starting to study astrology, it was well down that track that I was then exposed to the idea that the Earth could be flat. Like it
Mhm.
wasn't at the beginning of that journey, it was like further down that journey. So then I already had my understanding and model with regards to astrology and the globe model. So then I had to sort of go, well, hang on, does it work on a flat Earth model? And in fact, it actually was one of the key things that sort of pushed me right into like, this is the reality.
Mm.
Because if you look at the globe model, we're an infinite little speck floating in a sea of infinite specks that's just traveling and orbiting and rotating and doing all these phenomenal changes. Yet the sky that we look at is the same sky the first person ever on Earth looked at. It hasn't changed. It changes within itself because it goes through its orbits with its different sort of planetary cycles and phases and things, but it's the same stars, same planets, same. And what are they doing? They're doing this around the top of us. So the globe model is that there's no point to this. There's no purpose. It's just a big bang. It's an accident, and we're expanding it, ever expanding places. And you're an infinite speck, like on a sea of just infinity. Like you have no purpose. The flat Earth model says, oh no, this is a realm, right?
Mhm.
And everything that's happening within our cosmos is directly happening above us, right? So it brings it back to like, oh shit, there must be some purpose for us to be here then. It must be there must be some reason and purpose beyond just what we're conditioned to believe within the sort of globe and materialistic framework. And that's what sort of opens you up to the idea of like we're more than human. We're being human for some purpose or reason, right? But we're only temporarily here as a human. And you know, our connection to the cosmos is like very fucking close, local, and personal. So it sort of gives you that idea of like, oh, there is purpose and meaning behind this. And then you see that the mainstream's idea of astrology is horoscopes, magazines, and newspapers. And it's by very nature that they sort of ostracize it and call it pseudoscience. Yet, when you go above the sort of bureaucracy level and the political and corporate level, and you go into like the I call them the dark overlords or the powers that want to be, they're all utilizing astrology and, like you say, numerology and the tarot and all those things. And they don't operate with the same sort of conditioned framework of reality that we do down here and this sort of, conditioned level. So that's the first thing is to understand that the flat Earth model doesn't dismiss anything. What you have to do when you're trying to reconcile the two is let go of NASA's idea of what we've been conditioned and your grade 10 science book in relation to space, because you're looking at a completely different model. Well, people go, oh, well, if the Earth's flat, the planet's flat. Well, who says the planet's a globe? It's a
Sure.
light in the sky. Our ancestors called them wandering stars,
Big ball of gas. Yeah.
right? Yeah. And if you break down the word planet, you've got the word plane, which what does a plane mean? A plane means a flat plane surface.
Mhm.
If you add the letter T to the end of it, you've got now plane it, right? Now the T is a symbol for matter. So where was Jesus crucified? He was crucified on the cross, which is a T, of matter. So when you add T to something, you're adding matter to something. So they're saying the plane of matter. And then we call that, oh, that's a planet. And we then have been conditioned by NASA, right, and their CGI balls to think that a planet, which is a plane of matter, is a round ball in space. And that's what we are, and that's what everything else is. So when you're then trying to reconcile that against a flat Earth model, you have to let go of that idea. And that's what people can't do because they're like, but hang on, I thought like, Jupiter was a gaseous giant. Well, that's what you've been conditioned to believe. What if it was just a light in the sky? And that light has a frequency and a vibration, and it resonates at a particular aspect of consciousness. And that this realm that we're in is an energetic realm, and it's a realm of consciousness. And what the planets do is they're like little dials on a clock face, they tell us what time the energy of consciousness is at and how we're cycling through this, experience of reality. So that's sort of I look at the two different versions of this. In relation to what you're saying about being a Taurus, if we just identify with our sun, then what differentiates you between you and every other Taurian? Because I'm sure you know other Tauruses and you might share some similarities, but you're not the same.
Same. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. So fundamentally, there's 12 different types of Taurus. There is 12 different types of Virgo. There's 12 different types of every sign based on the time you were born. Because we have two things happening in astrology. We have the planetary position within the zodiac, and then we have our relationship to that position at the moment in time and place we were born. So what happens is if you were born in the morning as the sun was rising, just coming up, right, you'd be a Piscean Taurus. If you were born at midday when the sun is above head, you'd be a Capricorn Taurus. If you were born at sunset, you'd be a Libran Taurus. And down at midnight, you would be a Cancerian Taurus. And you could then look at all the different sections of the sky, which relate to the 12 signs of the zodiac, as saying that there's 12 different types of Taurus. So the first thing to differentiate you between you and every other Taurus is say, well, what time were you born? Right? Because that matters. And you might think, then how does it matter what time I was born if I'm a Taurus? Well, think of the quality of time at sunrise versus the quality of time at sun up, like as in midday. What are we doing when the sun's rising? We're coming out of a sleep state into a waking state. So we're coming out of an unconscious into a conscious state, and we're doing very personal and private things. We're getting dressed, having a shower, brushing our teeth, having our breakfast, drinking our coffee. It's personal, it's private. So that quality of time relates to a specific quality of experience. So therefore, it modifies the expression of the planet that's there. And if it's your sun in Taurus, then it's going to give the modification of being like a Piscean type Taurus. Why?
Right.
Because that house, which is just a section of the sky related to one of the zodiac signs, that house called the house of the rising sun, right, connects to the 12th sign of the zodiac, which is Pisces. Just as when the sun is directly above us and we are out in the day, we're being productive, we're, working, whatever we're doing, we're out sort of side, the sun above our head, that refers to the sign Capricorn, the 10th sign of the zodiac. So if you
Mhm.
were Taurus born at midday, you'd be a Capricorn type Taurus. So a Capricorn type Taurus is like driven by ambition, goals, public image, reputation, accomplishment and achievement, success, recognition, all those types of things. So then you put the Taurus into that, expression of energy, and you go, okay, that's the type of Taurus you are. So that's just your sun. Then we look at the moon and we can do the same thing. Then we look at what was the sign that was rising as you were born, because that has a lot of importance as well. It helps to understand your intrinsic nature, the sort of mask that you wear, your physical appearance, how you interact with first encounters, and how you do anything for the first time.
Mhm.
That's your rising sign. But then you have your Mercury, your Venus, your Mars, which are different aspects of your personality, how your mind works, how you think, how you communicate, what your values are, how you relate, what you love, your Mars, what your desires are and how you chase them, how you fight or flee when it comes to danger. So these are all different aspects of all the different placements of your planet. So
Wow.
no two birth charts are the same. Even
Mm.
if you're a twin, there's a difference in time of birth. And even if it's only a few minutes, it's subtle enough to create a difference within the energetics of your makeup.
Yeah.
So even though you might share similarities with 1/12 of every other person out there based on being a Taurus, 1/12 of the sign, right? There is 12 different subtypes or main subtypes to that Taurus, and then there are nuances and subtypes to those 12 types. So all of a sudden you go that one Taurus, all of a sudden it's like, well, there's lots, there's an infinite ways in which you could be a Taurus.
Yeah.
And what a birth chart does is it connects you to the understanding of that energy. So it makes it very personal and unique for you. And it separates or individuates you from every other Taurus or every other person on the earth. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and the other way to sort of understand this, and I'll sort of because I tend to talk a lot,
So,
is just because sort of people go, well, how does it work? Well, is the planet causing me to be that way? I look at it like this: you're a soul having a human experience. You don't have a soul. You are a soul. Your soul has a body, and you call your body Adrian or Luke. But that's not who I am. That's who I am being while I'm physically bound, right? I'm not my body, I'm not my name, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feeling. I'm the awareness that experiences these things, and we could encapsulate that as like spirit, soul energy. So that's intrinsically who we are. Now, energy, which is the soul, can't be destroyed nor created, it only transforms or transfers. So that part of you, it doesn't die. The body does because it's physically bound. And anything born into the physical plane has a beginning and an end. Everything that's physical is a beginning and an end. That's why our ancestors inscribed upon the stars and the constellations, astrology, the knowledge of it. Why? Because that's timeless. That doesn't change.
Right.
Whereas they can't put it in stone or papyrus paper or anything like that because it's temporal. It doesn't last epoch to epoch to epoch or to
Yeah.
age to age to age or to great year to great year. It won't last. Whereas the stars are always there.
That
So
was
they
that.
superimpose that knowledge up there for us to go, that's how we understand reality. We look to the stars.
Mm.
Um, but coming back to the soul, right? Every experience you've ever been through in a body or not, or in this lifetime or other lifetimes, leaves an impression upon the soul. And that impression modifies the soul's energetic frequency and vibration. And each soul is like a unique energetic key. The cosmos is a giant energetic lock, and every now and then there's a match between the two, and there's a pathway for your soul to incarnate into a new physical experience. So, therefore, if we look to the precise moment, date, time, and location of your breath, when there's the unity of the body, spirit, and soul coming together to create you as a person, and we look to the sky, we can say, oh, the energetics of the cosmos at that precise time was this. And Adrian, you matched it, right? Because there's a correlation over causation. Like it's not causing, it's correlating. Your energy matches that energy. So here you are. So then
Wow.
we understand the sky, we can say, well, we can understand you energetically. And we haven't been taught in the conventional education system the language of the stars for very good reason, because it's the key or one of the keys to self-actualization. Now, you imagine a plane of inertia of people awakened to self-actualization. We wouldn't live in this matrix type of conditioned reality, be asleep and fighting each other and at war and conflict and all this confusion and misunderstanding of it. We would be awakened, so
Mm.
they
Mm.
don't, though powers that be that have created the conventional education system, which is, manipulated by many different aspects, they are like happy the fact that we don't really know our true selves, right? And
Yeah,
astrology is one of the keys to understanding that.
I agree. There's a there's a lot that you just said there. Um,
Sorry about
I,
that.
I was married to a Taurus for 20 years, and we were like a week apart in terms of birthdays,
Yep,
but miles apart in terms of personality and character and all
right.
that kind of stuff. So I totally with you then. My boys were all born in the morning, so they were born at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning, that sort of thing. They were
Mhm.
I think for me, I was like 20 past 2 in the afternoon.
Okay. So
So
you'd
20
probably
past
be
2.
like depending as Taurus that time of the year, you'd probably be like an eighth house Taurus, maybe a ninth or an eighth house Taurus. So the subtone to that is either Sagittarian or Scorpio,
Yeah, right.
yeah, energy. Sagittarian is a seeker, likes to know, and Scorpio is the depth, right? Got to get to the bottom of things.
Got it.
Yeah, so that would then flavor the quality of that Taurus energy. So
Mm.
yeah, it's interesting. It's so like uh deep when you get into the analysis of it through the birth chart and look at all the different aspects. And like you said with your partner that you were with, who was a Taurus weeks apart,
Mm.
the rising signs and your moon signs would have been probably really fundamentally either, challenging or conflicting each other for you to feel like that miles apart energy, right? So even though your sun's this similar,
Mhm.
there may be other aspects here that were sort of in challenge, tension, or conflict that sort of created this separation. Yeah.
Mm. So I agree with the point that you made about aligning your, I guess, in a not too distant past. Everything was kind of based on the stars and based on the astrology in terms of cycles. You can, if you go back to my knowledge of, for example, um, what is it like, in Egypt, in terms of the pyramids, the way that they faced, a certain star or a constellation at a particular time, sort of peers through one little thing and the light comes through, like all of that stuff. I'm butchering all of that, but
No, I
it
get you. Yep.
it seems like that was always the basis of the way that humans were evolving, or at least planning, or like just running their lives, is based on, I'm not going to do this at this time because it's not aligning with the stars. Or they would look at the stars to go, is this the right time to make a decision, for example, like that sort of thing. And I can also see when you say like it's the key to self-awakening and self-actualization, self-realization, how that would tie into religion, which is largely you abdicating your power to somebody else instead of realizing that the power is within you. And then I guess, the Bible is kind of like being, in my mind, sort of manipulated to kind of relate you to, it's not you that's at the center of the universe, it's somebody else and it's creating and all that kind of stuff. And then the education system obviously detaches you even further because you're just programmed to memorize facts and things like that. And so as long as it's drilled into you, then talking to things like this is discombobulating. It's kind of like it fries people's brains. And I have these arguments and debates with my kids, especially because they're like really academically smart and I'm not. So I just kind of like talk to the things that I feel and I intuit and all the rest of it. And they
Mhm.
go, but it makes no sense. You don't realize what a, retard you're sounding like because you're talking about stuff that just goes against every book and lesson that I've learned in school, so we always have like this
Yeah.
uh, these arguments. But anyway.
I'm the same. I got three boys, and my two eldest boys are very similar. But they're very curious. They ask a lot of questions in relation to like my beliefs and ideologies and things.
Mhm.
And they're super open to it, but they're in conventional education as well. So um, that's something we might go into this. But yeah. So the other point that you were making there in relation to it being used ancient times in our not so past history, we had a strong connection to astrology, like things were done at certain times because of the celestial moments, monuments built to them and stuff like that.
Mm.
It's still happening today. If you look at the week that we use and the way the week is formulated into the week, the month, and the year, like the 7 days of the week, the seven planets rule one of those days. If you look at the
Right.
clock on the wall, why do we as our number system go from 0 to 9, right? And then repeats. But the clock has 12 numbers, right?
Hmm.
Because there's 12 signs of the zodiac, and the division of the great wheel in the sky, right, is by 12. So, then they say, oh, whoever invented the wheel would have been rich. Well, it was invented before humans were even existing. So like that is utilized to formulate the reality that we live in. And then even further to that, with what happened this year, the conjunction of the Saturn Neptune conjunction occurred in Aries at the beginning of this year, which I sort of loosely made some forecasting around to suggest, oh, this is the beginning of World War III. Why is it that these things happen at certain times? Like go back to 9/11 and look at the astrology and go, oh, that was the perfect time to do that. Why are these things continue to do that? Because the people in the know that if they align their actions in the material plane to the celestial sphere or, cosmos, then they're going to have better chance of that unfolding in the way that they desire it. Right. It's a bit like a river and it's flowing, and all of a sudden you have an ability to read the current. You know exactly how it's flowing. That's what the stars do. They tell us the flow or current of consciousness. That's why certain things happen at certain times. Sometimes it's just connected, correlated, and other times it's intentional, like it's manipulated to be done at a specific time. If we go
Sure.
back to 2024 when Donald Trump's ear was shot, like right at that particular astrological alignment that affected his personal birth chart, oh, there's a assassination attempt. It's
Right.
like, well, that's the perfect time to do that because that's the astrology supports that. So it's
Mm.
almost like the people that are, the powers that want to be playing the Game of Thrones, they know what time it is. And it's not based on the calendar, it's based on the clock in the sky. The big wheels keep on turning, and they
Yeah.
know how to read that and then play out the Game of Thrones down here. And the people that are uninitiated, which is the vast majority of people living in air conditioned, educated, conventional educated programming, have no idea.
Mm.
So
So it's obviously used for good and for evil, right? Like it's something that can be used for your own gain in terms of self-awareness and self-actualization, but at the same time, it seems to be manipulated and used for nefarious reasons to kind of like, I've heard, for example, like the term energy harvesting, like this is I think we are in a period where at the moment it's like it's an energy harvesting period. I could be wrong, but it's like, this is the time of sacrifice, or something like that, which ties in. Am I on the right track there, or am I?
absolutely, yes. There's a component of that. There are three versions of the use of this sort of knowledge. One is white light for good. One is grey for neutral, not for good or for bad, and one is dark, which is for bad. The dark side was more satanic, which basically means power and control over the material plane. So they utilize the dark arts, right, or the occult knowledge, esotericism, to for self-serving means to maintain power and control of the material plane. And we call that Satanism. So there is different factions within the initiated class that know how to read the sky and utilize these things and do things at certain times. And you have a variation of them. I think that there are definitely white wizards that are trying to do good, and there are dark wizards that are trying to maintain power and control, and then sort of grey in the middle that are neither. Like a Gandalf character in Lord of the Rings.
Got to say, it sounds like a bit of the Lord of the Rings coming through here.
Now, if you need energy to manifest, which is obvious, you need energy, and you can then control a mass population's energy via what you do and when you do it, because you can then harvest their reaction or response to those events, then you're not doing small manifestation. Like, I had an opportunity for a new job or I met a new partner. No, it's like you're fucking changing the world because you've got mass awareness and you can manipulate it and control it,
Sure.
right? So when they do certain things, the shock and awe or effect, and then people's reaction, that's their loosh energy, their emotional response, is channeled into the manifestation of whatever the desire was for whoever did that ritual.
Mm.
So yeah,
But look,
it's
like
it's
also the thing that is happening at the moment is like, I don't know what 2020 was like for you through like the pandemic and things like that, but for me it was gut wrenching and soul searching and just all of that, all of that stuff. Very angry and going from dark to light in a physical and spiritual sense. Um, in saying that, at that time there were people that were clearly flourishing in a shit time. So, and equally now, like we talk about World War III, we talk about there's clearly a global push for an economic collapse. If you buy into Agenda 30 and all those sorts of things, which I do, I think that there's a plan at play, and it seems to be pushing that way at the moment. But in the same breath, there are opportunities that we can either come out of with like nothing, or we can come out of and we can be more fortunate. So, when I speak to guys like Tom Barnett, he's like, I know people that went through COVID and got pay rises, and it was just the way that they were accepting what offer was on board at that time. It was their vibration that they were. So I guess in a long-winded way, I'm trying to say is at the same instance that there is a looshing and an energy harvesting of everyone, and there's these things that are timed perfectly to put everyone in a state of fear, worry, stress, anxiety, depression, and squash everyone down to make me feel small and insignificant. There's also that same very energy that I can manipulate, coerce, utilize to my own advantage, which is going to escalate me in the best way possible. Is this making sense?
100%. Yeah,
So,
and the elites have been doing that for a long time. That's why they always benefit from no matter whether it's good or bad times,
sure.
because they
So,
know how to detach and take advantage of it to their best
got
abilities.
it.
So, yeah.
So, how then do you utilize these chaotic times and create something beautiful out of that? It's probably multifaceted because at the end of the day, like I've had a discussion with Chanel, my partner, the other day, and we're talking about the goings on of the world and the wrongdoings and things like that. And it's like, listen, you got to raise your vibration so you don't get affected by these things. My argument was that's not to dismiss that it actually happens. So, I kind of belief that I have a belief system that if you don't act against something that is wrong, then you're accepting and acquiescing to that wrongdoing. You're blindingly accepting that it just happens. There's nothing I can do about it. So therefore, again, you've given your power away. So anyway, I think
It's a
there's
fine line to
question.
walk there.
Absolutely. So
Because yeah.
how do you deal with all of that? Because you can obviously say, hey, listen, my business is flourishing,
Yes.
and everything's going great, and I just listen to the stars and all the rest of it. But to the layperson,
Mm,
we're kind of like, all right, well, how do I interpret these things going on? How do I be a force for good in my own life and as well as having a ripple effect on everything else around me?
mm.
Which I think a lot of people listening to this podcast will kind of sit in this like, I'm searching for answers. I want to know what I can do to make a difference in my own life. So there's probably 11 or 12 questions in there, but
And there's no one straightforward answer to that. I think the first and foremost thing is to practice non-attachment, so that you don't have to then attach to what is going on in a good or bad way. You can just be non-attached to it
Mm,
and in the observer role. And then what you've got to do is you say, well, the best use of your time and energy and resources, and what impact can you make in your own reality, in spite of what the fuck is going on in the world? What are people going to need when there's fear and uncertainty? They're going to need clarity. They're going to need grounding. They're going to need certainty in a way. And how can you provide that in your own skill set and way? How can you be that light? Now, that might mean you don't do anything different other than just showing up differently and not necessarily responding or going along with the conversations around, oh, there's war and what's going to happen. You say, like, that's their game. That's not my reality.
mhm,
So, it's a fine line because one could then argue, well, you're just being like apathetic and that's acquiescing and consenting and things. And I would argue that, like, well, okay, the opposite of that is to go into conflict with that, to stand up against it, to speak out, to be in outrage. And what impact will that have? Will it make any difference? So that's the fine line that you've got to try to navigate. I think that for the vast majority of people, the number one thing is that this is an opportunity for you to pull back and start that process of self-actualization, which is to start questioning what you think you know about this world, what you think you believe, and why you believe it, and what you were taught, and the reasons why, and realize that, hang on, there's something else going on here, and that we're being fed information and a story and a narrative because they want us to think and believe a certain way. So the first step is to break down that, right? So it depends on what stage someone is at. We go back to COVID. My awakening process, it sort of had completed by about 2017 for that first major sort of jolting. So when COVID come around, I was already an astrologer. I was already positioning myself, and my business was one of those ones that flourished
mhm,
because the people were locked down, people wanted answers, people had more time, they were online, and all of a sudden my work went exponentially massive. And I wasn't be able to tell them the answers, but I was able to look at their chart and help them understand themselves that could then give them a bit of sanity guiding through a really uncertain period of time. So the same thing is really happening now. How, in your own individual way, with your skill set and your mindset, how can you stand firm in your knowing and be a guiding light for those others around you? And that's the thing. The initiation process happened, like, it's been ongoing, but there was a big initiation really since COVID. Now it's to then integrate that initiation, like, okay, shit, I woke up and it's all. So now what am I going to do differently in my life to sort of be able to move through this next passage of whatever the hell they've got planned?
mm,
So can we, at this stage, can we then change what they're going to do? Probably not, but we can change how we choose to respond to what they're going to do. Whereas if you go back to COVID, right, the vast majority of people responded exactly as they were conditioned to respond. They were put in a state of fear, and then they went, "Oh shit, lock us down. Well, you got to wear a mask. We can't travel." Like you, oh, like So now with a different set of awareness, because you know the manipulation, the propaganda, the programming, the planning that went into that supposed, event.
Mm.
Now we have a similar thing going on. So, oh, you gotta do this, you gotta be well, working on that's how they want you to respond. So you're now consciously aware that your actions have an effect, and especially in your little nucleus of your reality. So the people around you, your family, loved ones, and friends, you
Yeah,
have an opportunity now to walk differently, to act differently. And that is the ripple effect that allows those others that are emerging into this new level of consciousness to go, oh shit, okay, I'm not alone, and there's someone there as a beacon of light that they can go, shit, okay, well, I feel supported. Because a lot of the 2020 stuff for people that were going through that, they felt isolated, ostracized, alone, outcast, right?
absolutely.
So it took more and more people to stand and say, no, we don't have to go along with that. I think that's where a lot of my success came with what I was doing, because I was one of those people in Melbourne going through the lockdowns, going, well, I'm not wearing a mask and I'm not going through that process. And I'm not going to allow that to control my reality, So people were like, oh, thank God there's someone out there that thinks like I think, just had the courage to sort of speak out about it. So the same thing can be happening now in a different way. And if you've gone through that awakening process or that mass awakening process that's still underway and it was triggered via COVID, now is an opportunity to act and walk differently in this life. And
Yeah,
then with your own individual skill set, with your own resources and energy and time, what can you do differently in your life? I think there's going to be a big push from this year through the next to the end of the decade of people pulling away from technology and social media and all that, coming back to community and grassroots connection, building, the things that really matter, having physical experiences again, and not all like superficial stuff based on a little black screen. So there's going to be a big push for that. How can you then position yourself to be in that place where you can cultivate and connect in that way?
yeah. Look,
Yeah.
I think for me, when I think back in the 2020 period and going forward, I guess my name got put up in lights because I was speaking up about what was going on. And I did it in a way that was, I don't know if this makes sense, but like um, scared, but also courageous at the same time. And I think that that level of courage that I displayed was helping people at least discover within themselves that maybe they had power that they weren't acknowledging or tapping into at that point. Economically, it was a disaster. Like I fucking lost everything and emotionally in terms of like a marriage and all that kind of stuff. It all turned to shit.
Yeah.
So now like things are remarkably different. But I feel like I had to kind of go through that, I don't know, like rebirthing or like that cocoon sort of process of, just squeezing all the big pimple at the end and all the pus coming out, so
Yeah.
it kind of got rid of a lot of that angst. I guess to my point now, I feel like a lot of people that have proven to themselves that they survived such a tough time. Like it just you realize probably another analogy that doesn't really make sense, but it makes sense to me is like when I started doing mixed martial arts with my kids, I had never done anything of a combat sport before. So it was very scary. But then you realize after getting hit a couple of times that your jaw's not made of glass, like you're not going to break. And you could just sort of weather the storm when it comes in. You learn how to get hit and you learn how to hit. So you just prove to yourself that you're not that fragile.
Yeah.
Right. So I think a lot of people get to this point where they're thinking about the future and what's going to happen. And if you haven't realized it already, it's just like it's you get through it. Like it is there's a light at the end of the tunnel, not to sound too esoteric, but I guess my point before, just to put a lid on this, is I think the new age kind of positive mindset type of thing is all love and light and forgive and just sort of think that the grass is green and put your mind into a positive state. But I do feel like there is a knife's edge in terms of there needs to be some sort of pushback and resistance, not to the point where you just find yourself just always in battle. I agree with what you're saying. It's like, to what end are you just fighting all the time? And again, to what you said half an hour ago, is like, um, are you forming an identity around that's who you are? You're the fighter. You're the guy that goes out in the front and starts to, start trouble. So it's one of those things that becomes part of your identity if you allow yourself to get like swallowed up by it. And I think technology, podcasts, you can see the rise and fall of people that are just like gone up to this sort of identity of I'm the outspoken person about all the wrongdoings of the world, but now you're just searching for everything new that's wrongdoing, and then all of a sudden that's your role in life. I don't know. To me, it seems it's like there's no harmony in that. You're always fighting. Your body would be riddled with fucking
Yeah,
cortisol, like
yeah.
24/7. So it's a debilitating way to perform. So
You get a lot of people that are trapped within the conspiracy and the dark side of things, and everything's evil and against you and all of that.
yeah,
And it's like
and
you have to
truth
free
and
yourself
movement
from that
is kind of
because,
like yeah.
yeah, you're trapped within that paradigm.
Hmm.
Um, Two things I want to bring to that is one, the best song that illustrates what to do is the Peter Gabriel song, Salisbury Hill. It's
Uh-huh.
about a spiritual awakening. And it's about what he does. He has to come back into his life and he has to choose which connections to keep and which connections to cut. And then when it comes to the machine, which is another word to say matrix, what does he do? He walks right out of the machine. He walk out of the machine. Like I'm not part of that anymore. I'm not allowing that to like grab me and hold me and tell me like that's how I've got to live my life and who I've got to be and what we've got to do and how I've got to vote and what I've got to need and have to stay comfortable and successful.
Mm.
Like you got to walk right out of that shit. The second thing is that darkness, which is like fear. So when they're put into a state of fear, oh my God, there's no fuel. Oh my God, there's World War III. Oh my God, there's COVID. Oh my God, whatever the state is, that's the tool the dark side has to manipulate and control the masses is fear,
Hmm.
right? What fear does is put you in a state of darkness, and the opposite of that is a state of light. So
Correct.
light is an expression of light force, life force, your divine light, creative force. The most rebellious thing that you can do in these dark fucking times is be creative. Get creative in your life. What does that mean for a carpenter? How do you then utilize your skills to be creative in this life? Right? What does that mean for you? And your creation doesn't need to be like, I've got to make money and I'm going to be rich and I'm going to be like, that's trying to take your divine light and fitting it into the paradigm we've been conditioned to live within and saying, oh, that's my measure of success. Creativity is just connecting to that divinity within and being creative in your life. And you can
Mm.
be creative when you go to Woolies. Like you can. You can smile at strangers. You can pay for someone's groceries. You can help an old lady. Like there's ways that you can express your creative life force. And I think that's one of the most rebellious things you can do when the conditioning and the programming is like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And who or the political division. Oh, fucking it's the Democrats, the Republicans, it's the Labour, it's the Liberals, it's the Paulines, it's like fuck all that shit. That's the machine. That's the mechanisms of the machine. Walk out of that stuff. Right? Walk out of that, become independent and free from that. Build community. Come back to the really things that matter. The generation, I'm not sure what year you were born, but you seem like you're an Xer. Are you an Xer?
Yeah.
Yeah,
78.
same, 78. So we have a connection to reality before this life we're living and technology and the influence of all these types of things and the internet and social media and all of that sort of stuff. So
Mhm.
that Generation X, we are like the crossover generation because we can come back to those things that made us like life was fucking great. Our childhood was amazing. Riding around on BMXs and going camping and fishing and doing all those things that really mattered at the end of the day. Now we're all stuck living a life vicariously through this thing. So coming back to those basic things, I think there's going to be a big swing. And all of a sudden, if you've positioned yourself and you're creating something that can help people and cultivate community in that sense, I think that's the best way to navigate through. And it's a rebellious act against darkness, which
Yeah,
is fear.
agreed.
Yeah.
Um, just in wrapping this up, I know that you got a lot on, so I appreciate your time. Um, with your knowledge of astrology and the way things are happening in the world at the moment, what do you see in terms of what's happening, what's forecasted, and I guess for a lot of people listening, they'd be like, how do I navigate myself in and around all of this stuff? Because it does seem like at the moment there's a crescendo of sorts starting to come to fruition, but it's happening in multifaceted. Like, Luke, you've got an almost like an end times type of deal going on monetarily, in terms of uh, um, a mass global scale, right? But then at the same time, you've got a mass awakening. So, we talk about 2020, but then what's encouraging to see in the public at the moment is just like, if you didn't do anything about COVID and you weren't upset with how things were going then, now that you realize that everything's turned to shit and we're paying a fortune for everything and the governments are manipulating, and like you said, the powers that be are kind of yeah, doing their puppeteering that they do. There seems to be an ever increasing now, like it's almost like a quickening, in terms of awakening period. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's they're sort of they're co-present, right? So this whole like collapse and war and uncertainty and the end of the world and fucking economy and all that sort of shit is coexisting at the same time with the rise of consciousness and the
Correct.
awakening and the sort of speaking out and the sort of, like, hang on a second, this is bullshit type shit. So
Yes.
they're co-present. As far as from an astrological perspective, this year it sees a lot of uncertainty and volatility continuing right through until probably the middle of the year.
Hmm.
In the middle of the year, there is a pretty significant, huge astrological alignment. And knowing the powers that be utilize and manipulate these types of celestial events to implement things, I would see that as a pretty significant turning point. And that's around early July and late July. Um, we might have some sort of false flag terror attack, sudden shock event, maybe a attack on the grid or, cyber attack or something like that, that might lead then to a place where, the war tends to escalate further. If we expand out and look at the next 5 years towards the end of the decade, prepare for global war. I think that's the direction that we're heading into. And that is, there's lots of different reasons why that might be the case. A restructuring of control and resources and all those types of things, a collapse of the economy and a new system coming through. They can't just say tomorrow on a news sort of, segment or a public sort of announcement to say, hey, we're going to end the current economic system. We're going to start a new system. They've got to collapse the old thing first. And that's where we are now from this year is the beginning of that collapse phase. So one thing that's happening individually is the collapse of the idea, belief, hope, faith in the future that we were all led to believe pre and post COVID time. If we just do this and go back to normal and we can just keep doing what we've been doing, this year is the beginning of the collapse of that and a realization that the future you thought you were building towards and living towards and hoping and putting all that faith and belief into, that's ending. Does that mean that life's going to end or the world's going to end or it's all? No, it just means that that version of reality that you had been led to believe, it's over. And we are going to, if you look at the economy of things, right, and the way the financial systems work, and the shifting of global powers, we're going to a new economic system at some point in the future. How do we get there? Collapse the old one. So what does that mean? Well, collapse of the economy. So stock market, a crash, all those types of things, they're coming. They're not too far away. We're going to go through in the next 2 to 5 years the collapse of those things. How do they then create the sort of response and reaction from the masses that they do? Oh, well, then they go to war, right? We go to some type of global war because it's on the outcome of those things that they can then implement. Oh, look, we have now the solution. This is the solution now. We're going to break down borders. We're going to end the political system and state this new global governance and one world currency and all that type of thing. So that's their agenda and their plan and everything. I think ultimately long term it fails. Short term, that's where they're moving us to. So how do you navigate that? Well, you walk out of the machine and you say, well, what opportunity can I have? And I don't have to partake in that. And, we talk about compliance to these types of things, the non-compliance in COVID or the compliance of COVID versus now in relation to like digital currency and ID. Okay, well, might have an opportunity in the coming future to, enact that non-compliance.
Hmm.
But what does that mean if you're not going to? Because in COVID, for myself and for other people like, on that journey, non-compliance meant ostracization, meant you couldn't travel, meant you couldn't go to the pub, meant you couldn't see your friends, meant you couldn't do all these things. So were you prepared? Maybe for some people, it meant you didn't have a job anymore. So, are you prepared for that reality? Like, that's what I would say for people to be doing when it comes to like, I'm not going to comply to blah, blah, and I don't have to do the digital ID. Okay, cool, that's okay. But you understand the implications. That means you have to take responsibility for yourself. And that's where then, your own reality, your social group, friends, family, and community is going to be super vitally important. And that's what you should be cultivating. Um, this year, right now, we're in that really interesting period with the war going on. We're at a peak moment in Aries season. A lot of planets in Aries, Mars Saturn conjunction. The defining moment is in the next few days is in relation to the ceasefire and the Strait and all of that. The impact of the war so far has been higher petrol prices. The end of this year, it'll be higher everything
Mm.
because everything is going to go up because of the cost of fuel. And it hasn't gone up yet. The fuel's gone up and everything's starting to go up. Maybe your Uber costs a little bit more, but wait till we get to the last quarter of this year. We're going to see the real impact of that. And we're going to see a lot of inflation as a result. So what does that mean for the individual? And that's what you're going to prepare for, is that the knock-on effect of this. I think that the war is a trigger and an escalation, and it's going to continue that way. And there's going to be hot spots and low spots, and it's not, and it is, and it's this illusion of keeping people guessing as to what's really going on. Pull back, detach, observe it, be entertained by it, or disconnect from it completely. Don't let it overwhelm you and swamp you. Does any one person out there at the moment have the clarity on exactly what's going to happen and when and who's going to do it and why and all those things? No. So let go of your idea to like, I need to know what's happening, and just go, we don't know what's happening. And you can just respond then as information comes to light in a way that you go, oh, that's interesting. Oh, shit. Okay. And
Mm.
then you can use that information as it's occurring to go, okay, well, does that mean I need to do anything different in my life? The beginning of this war, what would you do different if you knew then? You'd probably buy a shitload of fuel before it went triple the price. Do you know what I mean? So it's things like that as we move along.
Yeah.
Um, in July, that's a big turning point. So there's some big shifts at the beginning of July around the 4th, and there's a big full moon with a Pluto Jupiter opposition. Very, very explosive, dynamic, massive turning point in the middle of this year.
Mhm.
If there was a time when they're going to escalate things, or go to some sort
Would
of
that
more
be the false flag
serious,
sort of moment, you think?
I think false flag is pre a big dropping of a bomb or something like that.
Really?
So, yeah, and look, I'm always happy to adjust as more information and new information comes to light. It's a bit like flat Earth. If someone came out and presented factual information to me that was like contrary to the fact, I would let go of the idea of the flat Earth. I
Hmm.
haven't yet seen that, but I'm open to it, right? It's the same with the forecasting with astrology. I think, based on the lunatics that are in control, or at least perceived to be in control, that we could escalate towards some sort of significant shock thing, which would then lead to like, oh, well, now this has gotten real serious and we're going to press that little button and things get a little bit
That
heated.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, they seem to present an idea and then justify a means to going forward with it all. So, and yeah, there's the war that's currently in operation. Ukraine would be another one. Obviously we can talk to 9/11. We can speak to COVID, as we have done, but these are all catalysts to further put to I don't know, lay the tracks for what's to come. So the good thing about all of this stuff, Luke, is particularly when you look into the agendas and all that kind of stuff, it's fairly self-explanatory that you know what is coming. So how they get there. To me, it's always surprising. Like I honestly didn't think uh, a, a, a a petrol crisis would be a thing, but the more you sort of look into it and then read the leaves sort of thing, like it totally makes sense as to why they would do that. But I do like your thinking in terms of, if you know that that's where that's going, then you just look at your own life and go, where are the holes in my armor at this point? And I think for the vast majority of people, it would be physically, mentally, and then financially. Like, it's just preparing for those sorts of things. Um, but again, it'd be nice to know from a astrological point of view how that sort of relates to me, and how I can sort of interpret that landscape in a way of not of like predicting my own future, but using as like
The weather forecast.
signposts. Yeah, yeah, like just looking as a guiding light as to what I could potentially put my foot wrong or maybe look for, and all that kind of stuff. So that's to me is the most exciting thing about what you do, is I can go, well, this is what's presented. How do I either align or misalign with those sorts of things that may or may not happen? So.
That's a lot of the forecasting work I do with my clients, because we've got now like a bit of a framework and a narrative outplaying in the collective with what's
Mhm.
going on. But then when you take that astrological data and you put it and interpret into someone's individual chart, you can see like what area of your life is this impacting? And then we can focus there and go, what does that mean for you? And then we can ask the right questions to go, well, where are you at here and what's going on? And then we can look at certain key astrological alignments in the future and go, okay, these are key moments of decision point, change, action, diversion, conflict, challenge, right? So it gives you a bit of a map. It's like understanding the energetic weather. And then when you understand the energetic weather, you can decide, well, do I need to take a raincoat or am I going to wear my boardies, so to speak,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Why? Because I know the fucking weather. And that doesn't mean because there's certain astrological weather event occurring that you have to do a certain thing. But if you're aware of it, you can be like, well, at least I'm aware of what's happening. So our
Well,
awareness
in
is the key,
retrospect
right?
too, like Luke, you can look back and say, this is what was happening at the time that I reacted a certain way. So if that's my stimulus response at that moment, then that's another form of awareness to go, okay, well, this is what's happening at the moment. This is my retaliation to that particular event, circumstance. So now I have to course correct and kind of, step back, like you said, and adjust my position.
Yeah. A lot of the work I do with new clients is retrospective work because I want to go back and look at, like, let's say you got someone that comes to you and they're having a really difficult time in their marriage,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about, like it's the end and I don't know what to do. So I go back and go, when did you get married? So I go back astrologically and look at the cycle of time associated, the planetary connection to that, and go, where are you at? Shit, this does look like it could be the end of your marriage, or this is a period of upheaval and you'll get through it.
Yeah,
Why? Because we can track that retrospectively. And I did that myself because I didn't really start learning about astrology until I was about 32, 33.
got it.
And I had already done some significant things in my life. And I went back and looked at those key turning points. I was like, oh, that fucking makes sense from an astrological lens, why that was happening and why I responded the way I did at that time. And that's the awareness aspect that astrology can give you. It's like the light shining for you on your life and yourself and your path. And then the work that people say you got to do the work is what your life is for. It's for where you put your awareness into action and make changes or not. But either way, you're aware. So that's half the battle, is because you can't change what you don't know, right? Or can't see. Once you know and see, you can still do the same thing, which I'm, prone to because I like to learn through crisis.
Don't we all?
But I've got the awareness. I know, and I've got to work on that. That's something I'm working on. We've always got something there we're working on, an aspect of refinement or improvement. But with the awareness, it's that allows you to navigate it a little bit more easily, rather than being caught unaware and being like, oh fuck, what the hell's going on here?
Sure. Yeah, that's a large part of the last 5 years is just a what the fuck. So anyway, did you mention before what is in the stars in terms of when things start to mellow and maybe pull back to equilibrium, or is it
Look,
purely
if we
yeah,
expand right out, we've got Gemini moving into, we've got Uranus moving into Gemini at the end of this month. It'll be there till about 2032. Uranus in Gemini is where we're going to see a lot of changes to the monetary system, transportation, communication, navigation, messages, information, social media, like your ability to speak and or speak up and all those things. There's going to be a lot of disruptions and upheaval within that through that time period. About 2028, around January or February, I can't remember the date specifically, but there's a massive solar eclipse conjunct Pluto in Aquarius. That's a really significant defining moment of this arc of time, which takes us to the end of the decade. So I think that is where we get into like the significant holy fuck moment as we go from here to there. I think what you need to really, and I don't want to sort of trigger people too difficultly here, but you need to look at 2026 to 2031 as survival. How do you survive the collapse, the upheaval, the conflict, the uncertainty, the fear? How do you survive that? So you're going to have to reevaluate and reprioritize your actions, time, energy, and resources. And you're going to have to let go of like the hope, wish, and dream that you had pre 2026. So that's what you need to do. Survive. 2030 and 2032 onwards, we're okay. Now we get to start the rebuild process of what this world life reality looks like. And I think that there's not one potentiality. I think there's multiple possibilities depending on how we go through this next 5 years.
Yep.
I'm confident. Yeah, they'll push an agenda, they'll try their, propaganda and all of that, and there'll be casualties to that. There always is. Look at COVID. There were a lot of casualties to that period and that programming. So don't be a casualty. Don't be caught up in it. Survive this next period. Do what you need to can. Reevaluate, reassess, reprioritize your time, energy, and resources. Get through till 2030, 32. We rebuild. We rebuild a different reality. So what is that going to look like? I don't have a crystal ball.
Nice.
That's how I sort of look at the arc of time. Is like, you know what? All bets are off. 2026, all bets are off now. In the sense of what you thought may or not happen pre-2026. Now you sort of go, okay, this is going in that direction. The monetary system, the geopolitical systems, war, all that sort of shit. Okay, we're going through that. How do we survive? What do we need to do personally with my loved ones, the people I care about, my community? That's what we need to do, is just get through that period of time. When we get to the end of that, that's where we go, okay, cool, kumbaya now.
Nice. Well, it sounds exciting, scary and exciting at the same time. I think, I personally am looking forward to the next 5, 6, 7 years. I think that if you look back in history, it seems like history doesn't sort of repeat, but it certainly rhymes, as they say. Like there's a few instances that seem to be reminiscent of where we're at the moment, and it seems like for the most part it works out okay. So I agree with the sentiment of the survival of the fittest, and kind of like weathering this storm as best you possibly can. But man, we could talk for days.
Don't get caught up in it. Like don't get caught up in it.
I agree. Yeah,
It's
which
a
is
Game
a
of Thrones
task.
being played by people that are playing a game that we're not aware of, right?
Yes.
We're seeing mechanisms of it, but really the echelons at the top level, like, we don't fucking know who's doing what and why and how and all those. So don't get caught up in their game,
Yeah, I keep telling people that the war, if you want to call it a war or spiritual war, spirituality, in my opinion, is right in front of you. It's not sort of this much or the world view. It's what you do to affect yourself and the people around you at that time. And as you know, like, we are interconnecting energetically all the time. And I think that you sort of alluded this before, is the more that you can do that and have that ripple effect, as new agey and esoteric as that sounds, it's sort of the more breeds the more. But it starts with you. So
Absolutely.
yeah, mate, can you send me all of your links and all that kind of stuff, so I
Absolutely.
can pop them in the show notes? I'm sure a bunch of people are going to want to know more answers. You'll probably get a potential clientele of divorcees or potential divorces. They're like, is it going to end? Like, tell me. So I think there'd be
I went through that on my own journey. Like, I have 3 kids and separated from their mother, and that was part of my spiritual awakening process as well.
we've walked the same timeline, you and I.
Yeah, very similar. Very similar. Yeah. So, and that's not to say that that's going to happen to everyone that awakens. I know some beautiful couples that are going through awakenings simultaneously, and some are lagging and they maintain their loving relationships. But sometimes you're brought into conflict with the area of your life that's forcing you to be the old version of yourself. And that conflict might be your job, your partner, your social situation. And
Kids.
therefore it has to transform. And the likelihood of that transformation is that there might be an ending, or endings. So what I do with my clients is support them through that process, to know they're not crazy, they're not alone, and to continue on that journey, so.
Yeah, that's awesome. Man, well, until we speak again, I've really enjoyed this chat. I've got a lot out of it. So I appreciate you, man. I will circle back sometime in the near future. I think it'd be great to have a little catch up to see where the world's at towards the end of the year. Would be amazing.
I think August, September is going to be a good time for that checkup.
That'd be amazing.
Between now and the end of July, I think we're going to be like, oh, okay, shit.
Yeah.
We've got a lot to talk about now. So,
awesome, man. I look forward to it.
No worries, mate. All the best.
Till then, take care.
Cheers.